Field is a true crime book written by Joseph Wambaugh, focusing on the murders of LAPD officers Carl Hettinger and Ian Campbell. In The Onion Field, Joseph Wambaugh used his experience as an LAPD officer to write about this heinous abduction and crime. Joseph Wambaugh is a best-selling American writer known for his fictional and non-fictional accounts of police work in the United States, mostly of which are set in Los Angeles. He won 3 Edgar Awards and was named a Grand Master by the Mystery Writers of America. After receiving an Associate of Arts degree from Chaffey College, he joined the Los Angeles Police Department in 1960 and served for 14 years, rising from patrolman to detective sergeant. He has also earned a BA and MA degrees from Cal State Los Angeles. Joseph Wambaugh was enraged and prompted into writing this thorough account of what actually happened on the night of March 9, 1963, after seeing the poor treatment Officer Hettinger received from his superiors after the murder. I am Teresa, and welcome to Canvas and Crime Chronicles, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll be alerted every time I upload a new video. Carl Hettinger was born on October 9, 1934, when as American police officer of the Los Angeles Police Department from 1958 to 1963. Before that, Hettinger formerly served in the United States Marine Corps from 1952 to 1958 and in the Korean War and Vietnam War. He had 2 sisters, Miriam and Eunice, and was raised in Los Angeles. He was married to Helen Davis in Las Vegas, Nevada on May 1, 1962, and they had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. According to the officer who investigated the crime, Hettinger suffered from survivor's guilt because of his partner, Ian Campbell's death, describing it as a tremendous guilt complex. In addition, Hettinger was forced to visit other squad rooms and publicly admit blame for his lack of courage at the Onion Field. His experience inspired the controversial Hettinger Memorandum, which states that officers are never to give up their weapons. Officer Hettinger was called a coward and was treated bad by his superiors because he had given up on his gun in an attempt to save his partner. Hettinger became very depressed and found it difficult to function, so he was transferred to a less stressful job as a driver for one of the police chiefs. But after being caught supposedly shoplifting, Hettinger was forced to resign from the police department. Policeman Ian Campbell was a U.S. Marine Corps veteran also, and served in the Los Angeles Police Department for 5 years before he was killed on duty. He was survived by his mother and 2 daughters. He is buried in Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Glendale, California. Finally, in 2012, Carlos Avenue and Gower Street, the location of the crime, in Hollywood, were renamed Ian Campbell Square, and California State Route 101 in Los Angeles was also renamed Ian J. Campbell Memorial Freeway. March 9, 1963, LAPD officers Ian Campbell, age 31, and Carl Hettinger, age 28, were riding in an unmarked police car. They pulled over a 1946 Ford Coupe containing 2 very suspicious-looking men at the corner of Carlos Avenue and Gower Street in Hollywood. The 2 men, Gregory Powell, age 30, and Jimmy Lee Smith, also known as Jimmy Youngblood, age 32, had recently committed a string of robberies and each had a gun tucked into his pants that was not evident at the time of the traffic stop. These two crooks surprised the officers by drawing their guns immediately and disarming them. Powell, the driver, pulled a gun on Campbell, who calmly told his partner Hettinger, "He has a gun in my back. Give him your gun." Hettinger did as his partner requested. The two officers were then forced into Powell's car, and within 30 seconds after the traffic stop began, were driven north from Los Angeles on Route 99 to an onion field near Bakersfield, about 90 miles north of Los Angeles. Here the officers were threatened, beaten, and tortured until finally Campbell was shot and murdered. Hettinger was able to flee and ran nearly 4 miles to reach the safety of a farmhouse. The killing occurred primarily because Powell assumed that the kidnapping of the officers alone already constituted capital crime under the Little Lindbergh Law. However, Powell, being a thief and a robber and a lowlife, had his interpretation incorrect. Under the Little Lindbergh Law, at the time, kidnapping became a capital crime only if the victims were harmed or if ransom were demanded. Today, kidnapping in California is punished by life imprisonment, either with or without the possibility of parole, depending on the circumstances. Was arrested on the night of the murder after being spotted driving a stolen vehicle by California Highway Patrol officers. The following day, Smith was also caught. The lead LAPD investigator on the case was Sergeant Pierce Brooks. Both suspects were convicted of murder and sentenced to death. Ultimately, they received life sentences. For each of the lower court sentence followed a second trial and several appeals, where their death sentences were vacated when the California Supreme Court ruled in California v. Anderson in 1972 that California's death penalty was cruel and unusual punishment. In 1982, following the release of Jimmy Lee Smith from prison, Valerie Campbell, the daughter of slain officer Ian Campbell, contacted John Mancino. Mancino was the founder of Citizens for Truth, an organization that had recently led a successful petition effort to rescind the parole date of Sirhan Sirhan. convicted of assassinating presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy. Mancino wrote up a petition to have Powell's scheduled release rescinded. With Valerie Campbell's help, they collected 31,500 signatures in 3.5 weeks, which were then submitted to the California Board of Prison Terms, along with several thousand letters. The parole board then held a hearing and eventually rescinded Powell's release date. Then Powell's attorney was successful in convincing Solano County Superior Court Judge Ellis Randall to order Powell's release from prison in 10 days, ruling that Citizens for Truth's public outcry was the sole reason Powell's release was rescinded, which at the time was legally improper. Valerie Campbell then joined with Citizens for Truth's representatives, John Mancino and Dr. Howard Garber, along with the group's attorneys, in filing a legal brief in the First District Court of Appeals in San Francisco, demanding that Powell remain in prison. The group prevailed both at the Appeals Court and the California Supreme Court, leading to Powell's spending the rest of his life in prison, where he died in 2012. Board hearing on January 27, 2010, Powell was denied parole. In a January 21, 2010 letter to state corrections officials, Los Angeles Police Union President Paul Weber urged the board to deny Powell parole, calling Powell a vicious murderer who has not yet paid his debt to society. On October 18, 2011, the California State Parole Board denied compassionate release for Powell, who had been diagnosed with terminal prostate cancer. Powell died on August 12, 2012 at the California Medical Facility in Vacaville. He was 79 years old. Smith was released in 1982, but returned to prison several times on drug-related parole violations. In December 2006, he failed to report his parole officer, and a warrant was issued for his arrest. In February 2007, a man matching Smith's description was detained and eventually identified as Smith. He was arrested, charged with violating his parole, and sent to the Pitchess Detention Center in Catastic, California. On April 7, 2007, while in the facility, he died of an apparent heart attack at age 76. Although Hedinger escaped that horrific night and lived, he felt scorned by his fellow officers and officials at the LAPD. He suffered severe emotional trauma for both the initial kidnapping and the murder of his friend and partner, Ian Campbell. A police training video was made using his experience as an example of what not to do when stopping and approaching a vehicle. Years after being forced to resign from the LAPD, he was elected as supervisor of Kern County, California, where he served multiple consecutive terms, and he died of liver disease in 1994 at the age of 59. I can't help but think, had this crime happened in more contemporary times, the entire thing would have been handled completely different. But I guess we live and learn. Thank you for listening to another episode of Canvas and Crime. If there's a story you would like to look into and recap, drop it in the comments. I avoid over-sensationalized serial killers and the over-popular stories. But feel free to offer suggestions, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you will be alerted every time I upload a new video. Thanks for listening.